Hey guys, in this video I'm checking out the A6000 through the newest A6600. I have a total of 6 cameras here. This video is sponsored by Audible, which has the world's largest selection of audiobooks and audio entertainment. Alright, so this is going to be a longer video because there's a lot to go through, so I'm going to jump straight into it. If you guys are interested in checking out pricing or more specs on any one of these cameras, as usual I will post links down below to Amazon and B&H, so definitely check those out. Let's get started. Here are the 6 cameras that I'm going to be talking about in this video. I have the A6000, the A6100, the A6300, the A6400, the A6500, and the A6600. So all lined up in numerical order. So I'm going to talk about similarities between these cameras first, and then we'll go through the differences, which is the important bit. So let's talk about the model numbers and the numbering structure of these camera models first, because that is a little bit confusing. So I have them arranged kind of in 2 rows. Now, the important thing to understand is that there were 3 camera models in the very beginning. So Sony started with the A6000, they upgraded that to the A6300, and then they upgraded that to the A6500. All 3 of these top cameras were sold simultaneously for years. This year in 2019, Sony upgraded the A6000, and the upgrade to that is the A6100. The upgrade to the A6300 is now the A6400, and the upgrade to the A6500 is now the A6600. So now we have a total of 6 APS-C Sony mirrorless cameras, but the bottom row is all 2019 models, whereas the A6000 is now 5 years old, 4 years old for the A63, 4 years old for the A6500. So hopefully that clears things up for you guys. Now let's talk about these similarities between these cameras. All 6 of these cameras feature Sony's 24 megapixel APS-C size sensor. With the A6000, you can see that they advertised that on the front of the camera, but they removed it with the rest of the model lineup. Although the sensor is the same size and resolution with all 6 of these cameras, they did update it with the A6300 by using some copper components that allegedly made it more efficient, better at capturing low light situations. So everything since the 6300 has an upgraded sensor. In fact, with the newer models, Sony has used a different model number sensor, which allegedly improves low light performance. In the real world, there's very little difference that I can tell between something like the A6300 and the A6100 in low light. All 6 of these cameras record full HD video in the excellent XAVCS format, which is really easy to work with. The A6000 records 1080p up to 60 frames per second, whereas the A6300 and above, everything after the A6300, all record in 4K up to 30 frames per second in the same format. These cameras also feature built-in Wi-Fi, which allows you to easily transfer photos and videos to your smartphone through the camera itself. All 6 of these cameras record in RAW and JPEG, Fine, and Standard. With the A6300 and newer, you also get the option of Extra Fine with JPEG. All 6 of these cameras feature excellent autofocus systems, and that's one of the things that differentiates Sony APS-C mirrorless cameras from the competition. The autofocus is unmatched by any other camera manufacturer out there, and Sony keeps pushing the envelope and improving the autofocus. All of these cameras feature the exact same Sony E-mount system, and the great thing about this is Sony has a 1-lens mount system, so you can use full-frame Sony lenses on all of your APS-C sized Sony mirrorless cameras and vice versa. Up until November 2019, all 6 of these cameras also use the exact same Sony battery, the NP-FW50. As you can see, it's a very compact battery. Unfortunately, doesn't last all that long, so be prepared if you own one of these cameras or you're planning on owning one. Stack up on these little batteries. With the A6600, Sony is using their full-frame battery, which is a Z-type. And you can see in a side-by-side, it's significantly larger. All 6 of these cameras are compact, easy to use, and very well built. I've owned this A6000, for example, for 4.5, almost 5 years now. It's never had any issues, any problems. So these are very well built mirrorless cameras, and from a reliability standpoint, I've had no issues whatsoever. So those are the similarities. Now let's go through one by one and talk about the differences between these cameras. In April of 2014, Sony released the A6000. This is a great little camera that has sold extremely well over the last 5 years or so. This camera again features 1080p recording at up to 60 frames per second. It features 179 autofocus points. This was revolutionary when it came out. The autofocus on this camera was amazing and nothing else on the market came even close. It shoots at a whopping 11 frames per second and captures excellent high quality, high resolution images and video. This is where the Sony A6000 series began, and to this day it is an excellent entry point for beginner to intermediate photographers and videographers. In February of 2016, Sony introduced the A6300. With the A6300, Sony added a couple of things and made a host of improvements. First and foremost, you can see right on the top of the camera, Sony added 4K video recording up to 30 frames per second. The great thing about Sony 4K is they take a 6K image, downsample it down to 4K, which results in a very high resolution, full of detail video file. In addition to that, with Super 35 mode, you get no crop with your 4K video recording, which is awesome. With 1080p recording, Sony updated this camera to allow you to shoot up to 120 frames per second instead of the 60 frame per second 1080p limit on the A6000. So for slow motion, the A6300 was a much better camera, allowing you to capture some really smooth, cinematic slow-mo shots. Now, as I mentioned previously, the sensor on the Sony A6300 was updated with some copper components, which again allegedly made it better in low light situations. In addition to that, Sony improved the autofocus of the A6300, so instead of 179 autofocus points like you got with the A6000, with the A6300 you got a total of 425, which is more than double the autofocus points. On top of that, Sony doubled the resolution of the electronic viewfinder on the A6300. They also added a microphone jack, so you can use an external microphone to record audio into the camera. They also added S-Log and several other picture profiles, so if you record a lot of video, this was a huge deal and a significant upgrade over the A6000. With the A6300, Sony also added a silent shutter, so instead of the shutter noise you hear normally, you can go into the menu system and turn on silent shutter, and you'll hear no shutter at all. It's still taking a picture. And you can also turn off that little beep noise as well, making this a perfect silent camera for those events where you don't want to make excess noise. The A6300 also shot at 11 frames per second, just like the A6000. It also featured a much better built magnesium alloy body instead of the composite body of the A6000. This body is weather and moisture resistant, so if you're out in the elements a lot, a much better camera to take with you than the A6000. Overall, the A6300 was a huge improvement over the A6000 with many new features and additions. In November of the exact same year of 2016, Sony released the A6500, which improved upon these two first cameras. The biggest addition with the Sony A6500 is now the inclusion of in-body image stabilization, or IBIS. You can see that on the top of the camera. Steady shot inside is Sony's way to market that. And what that is when you take a look at the sensor, you may not be able to see that in the video, but as you shake it, the actual sensor moves up and down, left and right, in fact in 5 different directions to compensate for camera shake. So if you don't have the steadiest hands in the world, you can still get a nice and clear shot. You don't have to worry about camera shake as much with this camera body. And this was especially beneficial for those who were using non-stabilized lenses. The kit lens, for example, here has optical stabilization built in. But if you use something like the Sigma 56, which I had out here earlier, this is a lens with no optical stabilization, so putting it on the A6500 means that I don't have to worry about camera shake as much with the A6500 as I would with the A63 or the A6000. In addition to the IBIS, the buffer on the A6500 was basically doubled over the A6300, which meant that you can continually shoot at 11 frames per second for up to 307 images in a row before the camera had to stop
and wait for all of the images to process. With the A6500, the electronic viewfinder was the exact same as that on the A6300. Also, the resolution on the back screen was the same. The only difference is Sony included a touch screen with the A6500, which was nice because it allowed you to touch an area on the screen and the camera would focus on that subject. In practice, I personally turned this feature off because I found when I was using the electronic viewfinder, my cheek would touch the back of the screen and it would focus on something that I didn't want to focus on. Also with the A6500, Sony added SNQ settings, so this is slow and quick recording, which allows you to go through and record in slow motion or quick motion, which was nice. As you may have noticed here, they also added some color to the menu system, which is nice. Also with the A6500, the shutter release mechanism was a bit more durable. Apparently it was tested to over 200,000 cycles. So this is a camera that's built like a tank. It's built to last for years and years and years. Sony also added an extra custom button. So you have custom 1, custom 2, and custom 3 on the back, whereas with the A6300 and the A6000 you only had the custom 1 button at the top and a custom 2 button on the back. The grip on the A6500 is nicer than the grip on the A6000 and A6300 because Sony expanded it. So if you have larger hands, this camera is much more comfortable to hold, especially with a long or heavy lens. This is a much more secure grip. The last thing I'll say about the A6500 is because they included IBIS, the battery life suffered. Now this camera used the exact same NP-FW50 battery, and the result was about a 15% reduction in overall battery life. So that was it. The end of 2016, this top row was Sony's APS-C mirrorless camera lineup. A6000, A63, and A65. That was it. That was until February of 2019, when Sony interestingly released the A6400. Before I discuss the many significant changes made with the A6400, let's talk about today's video sponsor, Audible.
As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, Audible has the world's largest selection of audiobooks and audio entertainment, including Audible Originals, which are documentaries, exclusive audiobooks, and scripted shows that you can't hear anywhere else. With Audible, you can stay informed, be inspired, or be entertained. What are you doing? I'm trying to read a book here, Lucas. If you're anything like me and you have a 1-year-old running around and hitting his head on chairs, finding the time to read a book is a challenge, but I can listen to an audiobook and still have time to play with my son with Audible. With the convenient Audible app, you can listen anytime, anywhere, and on any device, whether that be mobile, Alexa-enabled, Bluetooth, and more. You can listen at the gym, while shopping, in the car, while traveling. Anytime you can't read, you can listen with Audible. Every month you can choose one free audiobook regardless of price, as well as 2 Audible Originals from a fresh selection. Audible members also stay motivated and inspired with unlimited access to exclusive guided fitness and meditation programs. Members can also sign up for free updates from the Washington Post, New York Times, and Wall Street Journal, delivered daily to the app. If you start listening to an audiobook and it's just not your jam, you can also easily exchange titles at any time. One of the great things about Audible is you get to keep your library of listens forever. That's even if you cancel your Audible subscription. One of the recent audiobooks that I've listened to for a second time is Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is a classic. It's a very easy listen and a practical book that dives into the mindset of establishing wealth and creating it for your family. So again, I'd highly encourage that you check that out. Start listening today with a 30-day Audible trial. You can choose 1 audiobook and 2 Audible Originals for absolutely free. Just go to audible.com/Arthur. That's just my name. That's the code that you use. So again, audible.com/Arthur. I will have that linked down below, so just click the link and check it out. That is it. Let's get back to the comparison.
Back to the A6400. So again, this was released in February of 2019, and the biggest thing about this camera is the processing. In fact, what Sony did is they took the processor out of their high-end $4,000 A9 and jammed it into this compact APS-C camera. With this improved and more efficient processor, Sony was able to make a whole bunch of upgrades. The most significant one, and my favorite one by far, is the color science improvement. Now, The color science with Sony cameras has been okay. It hasn't been the best. Sony released the A7 III, and that had some amazing colors. With the Sony A6400, they put the excellent A7 III color science into a compact APS-C camera body. In addition to that, the autofocus on the A6400 was improved, so you had the same number of autofocus points, 425, but now all 425 of them were both phase detection and contrast detection autofocus points. This resulted in faster and more accurate autofocus performance. In addition to that, Sony added real-time eye autofocus, which was a bit of a game changer, especially for portrait photographers. What would happen with the new algorithms and the processor on the A6400 is that the camera would track the subject's eye. Once it lost track of the eye, it would track the face. And once it lost track of the face, it would revert to object tracking, such as the back of someone's head. To this day, this is one of the best autofocus performance cameras out there on the market. One of the biggest and most talked about additions to the A6400 was a flip-up screen. This is something that people were asking for years because they wanted to be able to see themselves while recording video, and Sony answered their cries with a pretty interesting, kind of complex mechanism, but it works. Initially, there were a lot of complaints from folks who wanted to mount an external microphone into the hot shoe, and that's why you can see I have a cold shoe relocation kit, so I can put my external microphone here, it will stick up and out, and it will not block my screen. Within the menu system of the A6400, Sony added a couple of nice features. The first thing was a built-in time-lapse. With the A6000, A6300, and A6500, you had to pay for an app, but it was included free with the A6400. In addition, Sony added HLG, hybrid log gamma, as a picture profile, which is awesome because it's easier to work with than S-Log, so if you're a filmmaker or if you like color grading your footage, this is a big addition. Another excellent feature added to this camera is the shutter auto white balance lock, which allows you to lock your white balance if you're continuously shooting for long periods of time. The menu system, as you can see on the A6400, also was improved. Basically, Sony took the menu system straight out of the A7 III and added it to this camera. Included in that is this last tab, the Star tab, which is My Menu. It allows you to add your own menu items here for quick access. While on the topic of the screen, the A6500 had an issue with 4K video recording, particularly outdoors. What would happen is, while recording your 4K video outside, the back of the screen would dim in order to either save battery or reduce heat, and you couldn't really see what you were recording if you were in bright sunlight outside. With the A6400, Sony solved this problem with a no-dim rear screen, so once you hit the record button and you were recording in 4K outside, you could still see everything you were recording. On the A6400, the ISO was also expanded to a whopping 102,400 in extended ISO. Another big upgrade with the A6400 is the record limit. There is no record limit with the A6400. So it used to be you could only record up to 30 minutes, and then at the end of that 30 minutes, the recording would stop and you would have to hit record again and record for another 30 minutes. With the A6400, as long as you have a battery that lasts and an SD card with enough room on it, you could potentially record for hours non-stop with this camera. Now, speaking of battery, because of the improvements to the processor inside of this camera, the battery life also improved. In my testing, you get about 15% better battery than the A6300, so approximately 25% better battery than the A6500. So all in all, the A6400 was a huge improvement, years in the making, and when Sony released this, there were people who were upset because it didn't have some extra features, because it wasn't the flagship that people were waiting for. But all in all, this was an excellent camera that was, as I place it down here, an upgrade to the A6300. Now, Sony released this first, I don't know why. A ton of people bought the A6400, myself included, and loved using it. It was an excellent camera, especially with the new color science. The resulting portraits that you got with the A6400 were better than any of the previous three cameras. So fast forward to October of 2019, Sony finally releases the A6100, which again is the update to the A6000. And you'll notice that the A6100 actually has the exact same build, material and quality as the A6000. With the A64, A63, A65, and A66, you have a magnesium alloy body that's weather and dust resistant, whereas with the A6100, you have the same composite body of the A6000, which isn't dust and moisture resistant. From the standpoint of improvements, the A6100 has a whole bunch of improvements over the A6000, even over the A63 and A6500. Among those, it has the same flip-up screen as the A6400. It also has no 30-minute record limit, so you can record for hours on this camera without stopping. It features a touch screen on the back, just like the A6500, A6400, and A6600. And as far as we know, it has the exact same processor specs as the A6400. The color science on the A6100 is just as good as that on the A6400, which is a huge improvement over these first three cameras. But Sony did have to distinguish the A6100 from the A6400. So what they did is they removed some key features. So I mentioned the build quality, it's not as good, and in the hand, it feels a little bit less expensive than the A6400, which feels a bit more premium. Besides the build quality, the first thing that Sony removed were the picture profiles. So with the A6100, there are no video picture profiles. So if you are into grading your footage, if you want to use HLG or S-Log, this is not the camera for you. The electronic viewfinder on the back, for some reason, the resolution on this EVF is much lower than the resolution on the A6400. So you get 1.44 million dots with the A6100 versus almost double that with the A6400 and the A6600. Another feature that went missing is the auto white balance lock that I mentioned with the A6400. So if you're recording continuously with natural lighting and your auto white balance is shifting, you will notice that. With the A6100, you get a microphone jack, which is a big deal. That means that out of these 6 cameras, all of them have microphone jacks except for the A6000. And I think that is pretty much it. The A6100 ultimately is an upgrade, but it's missing many of the great features that make the A6400 so good. November of 2019 rolls around and Sony finally unveils its flagship, the Sony A6600, which again is the upgrade or update to the Sony A6500. Now the Sony A6600 has every single upgrade that I mentioned in the Sony A6400, but they added a couple more. So first and foremost, this A6600 also has steady shot inside. So these two cameras on the very end, the A6500 and the A6600, are the only two cameras that have IBIS or in-body image stabilization. I mentioned this in my review of the A6600. I was expecting the IBIS to be updated or upgraded with this new camera, but in my testing, the IBIS performance of the A6600 is identical to the IBIS performance of the A6500. The next thing that Sony added to the A6600 is real-time eye autofocus in video. What that means is if you're recording someone talking, the camera is focusing on their eyes continuously as they move throughout the shot, which is pretty amazing technology for a tiny little camera like this. Next, as I already mentioned, the battery on the A6600 is the larger Sony full-frame battery, which gives you about 2.2 times the performance of the smaller FW50 battery, which results in about 820 shots that you can get with this camera versus about 420 shots with the A6400. As a result of fitting the larger battery to the bottom of this camera, the grip of the A6600 was extended even further. This is by far the most comfortable APS-C size Sony mirrorless camera on the market. The grip is nice and large, even for larger hands. When discussing grips, you'll notice that these cameras here, the A6000, A63, A61, and A64 all have the same shallow grip. The A6500 has a nicer, more pronounced grip, and the A6600 has the largest, most pronounced, most comfortable grip. Another addition with the A6600 is you get an extra custom button. So you get custom button 1, 2, 3 at the top, and custom button 4 right here. What I noticed in using this camera is the buttons at the top, especially the menu and the custom 3, are much more pronounced and easier to use. The next upgrade with this camera is, in addition to having a mic jack, you get a headphone jack, so you can monitor your audio as you are recording. Just like with the A6400 and A6100, the A6600 has that ever important flip up screen. It is also a touch screen, but it has the exact same resolution as the A6400 screen. The last thing I'll mention about the A6600 is you'll notice at the top, Sony removed the pop-up flash. Not sure why they did that, because they didn't really need that space for anything else, but all 5 of these cameras have a pop-up flash that works quite well if you need some fill light in a darker setting. With the A6600, I guess you need to bring your own external flash. What I'd like to do is conclude this video by talking about 3 things. Number 1, overheating. Number 2, pricing. And finally, my recommendation. So overheating was a big issue in the beginning, especially with the A6000 and the cameras prior to the A6000, the A5100, X5, and X7. With each model that Sony came out with, the A6300 and A6500, the overheating issue was improved. So the A6000, you could get about 25 minutes of recording before it would stop and overheat. A6300, you get about 40 minutes or so. With the A6500, you'd get almost an hour before the camera would shut down due to heat. And that's where things changed. With the A6400, Sony basically solved their overheating issue. I have been able to record with the A6400 continuously for well over an hour and a half without any overheating. In fact, when I was doing a comparison between the A6400 and the A6500, the A6500 was very, very hot after about an hour of recording, whereas with the A6400, it was still relatively cool to the touch. I've done a recording test with the A6100 and it performs just as well as the A6400, and the A6600 does the exact same. So in a nutshell, with this new lineup, these 3 cameras have solved the overheating issue. And the reason that I mention that is because if you record longer videos, whether that be weddings or YouTube videos, I would highly, highly recommend that you start by looking at these 3 cameras over the older models, because overheating is a big, big deal if you're recording for long periods of time. So let's briefly talk about pricing. In many ways, Sony is not unlike Apple in that they don't typically run sales very frequently. Now I say that, but the A6100 and the A6600 were both on sale during the month of December 2019. So I don't know if Sony is going to continue to run sales on these cameras, but from past experience over the last 4 or 5 years of using these cameras and buying and selling them, I haven't seen very many sales from Sony. I also don't know if Sony is going to continue to sell all 6 of these cameras at the exact same time. I don't particularly think that's a great idea because, again, the numbering structure of these cameras is really confusing, and due to the significance of the upgrades, especially with these 3 cameras at the bottom, it makes sense for Sony to just stop the manufacturing of these first 3 cameras and just sell the newest 3 model lineup. And that leads me straight into my recommendations. All 6 of these cameras are great. If you don't care about 4K video recording, if you just want something that's going to take really good photos, you don't care about having the highest specs, you don't want to spend a ton of money, you can find the A6000 for not a whole lot of money. I did a video just recently where I picked up an A6000 for $230 online. So these are getting cheaper and cheaper by the month, by the week. Even though this is a 5-year-old camera, if you pick one of these up in 2020, it will last you a long time, and it will allow you to take some excellent photos, especially if you're using good lenses. Now, if you are into making video, if you have a YouTube channel, if you record video professionally for weddings, if you have paying clients, I would highly recommend getting a model higher than the A6000. The A6300 is great, but I would not recommend this camera anymore because the rest of this lineup is better than the A6300. Likewise, the A6500 is great, but if I'm honest, personally, I would rather own the A6100 than I would the A6500. Even though the A6500 has a bunch of extra features and has that built-in IBIS, the color science of the A6100, the no record limit, the more efficient processor, the flip-up screen all make it a better camera in my opinion than even the mighty A6500, which is interesting to say because the A6100 is an inexpensive camera. Right now the MSRP on one of these is about $750, but again, like I said, this camera has already gone on sale, so you can pick one up for around $600, $650 if you look around. So let's make this really simple. If your budget is super duper tight, get the A6000. It's still a great camera. But if your budget allows for it, take a look at the 3 newest cameras from Sony. So I talked about the A6100. The A6600 is the flagship. If you have the money and you want the absolute best of the best, if you want a battery that's going to last you way longer than the tiny batteries in these cameras, if you want all of the features with no compromise, including that IBIS, this is the camera to get. Now, MSRP is $1,400 on this camera, but it's already gone on sale for $1,200. And at $1,200, there isn't another camera on the market that performs as well as this camera does. It is a perfect B camera if you have a full-frame Sony A7 III because the colors match. It's a compact body. You're going to be using the exact same batteries. There is a lot of reason to pick up an A6600 if you have the money. But in my opinion, the best camera out of these 3, the best bang for your buck is still with the Sony A6400. Now you're not getting some of the higher end features of the A6600, but this camera does everything, and it does everything exceptionally well. It's built well, it works well. This is by far my favorite camera to travel with. I've taken this thing everywhere. And the photos that I've taken with this A6400, with some good lenses, mind you, have been nothing short of spectacular. For around $850 to $900, the A6400 is Sony's best camera and the one that I would recommend if you do have the budget. Now, that's not saying that the rest of the cameras are bad by any means. These are all excellent cameras, and whether you settle on one of these newer models or you pick up one of these original models, you will likely be very satisfied with your purchase. If I had to arrange these cameras from worst to best, this is how I would do it. And some of you may not agree with me, but that's fine. Again, this is my personal opinion. A6000 is a great camera, but out of this lineup, it's the worst one here. A6300 is better. A6500 is better than that. In my opinion, the A6100 is better than these 3 previous cameras. The A6400 is better than the A6100, and the top of the line is that expensive A6600. So if you have the money, go here, but if you don't have the money, a great compromise is the A6400. If you're on a really tight budget, the A6100 is your best bet. These 2 cameras are still relatively expensive in the market, so most likely you can find an A6100 for less than the price of an A65 or an A63, so I'd recommend that. And then if you're looking at the ultimate budget, A6000 is still a good one.
That is it for the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thanks for all of your likes, comments, and support. If you own one of these cameras or you are planning on owning one of these cameras, make sure you stay subscribed. That's the whole point of this channel, is showing you guys these cameras and the excellent lenses that are available for them. So thank you once again, and have a great day. Bye-bye.